Natural versus medicated versus unmedicated versus physiological. What do they all even mean? And how are they different from each other? And why does it even matter? In today's video, I'm going to break down what each of these terms means, how they're commonly used, and why it matters that there is clarity for you on what they mean to you, and not only to you, but also to your care provider and your birth team. So let's start with the word natural, because I think this one is most loosely used and it means a lot of different things to different people, and so therefore it's also most misunderstood. But before we get into it, if you enjoy birth content like this, hit that subscribe button right now. So natural to some people can mean nothing more than vaginal versus a C-section, and that's the extent of what natural means to them. For other people, natural can mean unmedicated or with minimal interventions. But for other people, it could mean, well, I have an epidural, but I don't have other interventions. And then for others, it can even mean the use of drugs. I actually, with my own ears, have heard an OB tell a mother that Pitocin is very natural. So it can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. And what can happen is that you may tell your provider, I want things to be as natural as possible. And your provider will totally agree with that and say, yes, we can do that. But then when it comes down to it and you're actually in labor, you discover that their definition of natural might be a whole lot different than your definition of natural. So it's very important, especially with the word natural, that you clarify exactly what you mean by that, and so that everybody is on the same page and there's no surprises. Next, we have medicated, which is pretty straightforward. It is as it sounds. You know you want medication. Very often this is an epidural, more specifically pain medication. It can also include being induced with Pitocin or IV narcotics. However, even if you do know this is what you want, I still recommend that you do the research, because one thing that I have found is that sometimes you may think you want a specific intervention, but then there's other interventions that you know you don't want. And what a lot of people don't always realize is that that one intervention that you do want might lead to others that you didn't want. So make sure that you do your research. And also I would recommend find out how the interventions that you do think that you want are administered and how that all works. Because another thing I have found is that sometimes people are like, yes, this is something that I want, but they don't fully grasp how it's administered, how it works. And then when they find out, then they kind of have regrets and they're like, oh, if I had known. Then we come to unmedicated. And obviously for a lot of people, that just means no pain meds. For some people though, it could still include something like Pitocin. For others, it means no medication, no drugs whatsoever, whether that's pain medication, whether it's Pitocin, whether it's even something like antibiotics. Unmedicated is also often referred to as natural, but it really depends on some other factors as well, which we will get to later on in this video, as to how natural it actually is, even though it's not medicated. Again, it's going to depend on what your definition of natural is, but one thing that it is not necessarily is physiological. So physiology, very simply put, is just how the body works when it is functioning normally. And in physiological birth, we really look at what the body requires to be able to govern the birth process in a very effective way. That means, how does the brain work to release the hormones that are needed all at the right times in the right amounts? And what inhibits this? What supports it? And so we're looking at the whole picture, body, soul, and spirit, so that we can best physiologically support the birth process. This makes what many call natural birth much easier when you're in a setting that is familiar to you, when your body feels safe, when there is not pressure, either time restraints or pressure from people to do certain things certain ways, but where you're allowed to follow your body and listen to your body fully, where you can be fully mobile. All of these things contribute to how well your body can govern the birth process. And so physiological birth is where we honor all of that and we work together with it. So I actually just watched a video today of a mom who, it was her third birth, and she was doing this one unmedicated, and she had done the first two medicated. So her water broke and she wasn't having contractions yet, but evidently she must have gone to the hospital pretty much right away and ended up getting Pitocin, and it was a typical hospital birth from what I could gather, maybe limited mobility, IV, and probably not being able to eat or drink, all those things. And she at the end said that everybody had lied to her who had told her that unmedicated was worth it, because in her book it was not. And the thing about it is, people who call that natural birth just because it was unmedicated but it wasn't necessarily physiologically supported well, is that their understanding of what natural birth is maybe a little bit skewed, because they actually probably would have had an easier experience if it had been in a physiological setting and supported in that way. Because with Pitocin, of course, it doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier. Pitocin contractions are typically much more difficult, and they don't provide what natural oxytocin does. You don't have the same amount of endorphins released, and so your perception of natural birth is actually much more intense and difficult than what it could be if it was physiologically supported. So at the end of the day, it is of course your choice how you want to give birth, but it is important that we understand what these terms mean so that we are very clear with everyone around us and ourselves what it is that we are actually talking about and we actually want. If you want to hear more about how to make informed choices for your birth, watch this video on the screen, and I look forward to seeing you next time.